right, so welcome everybody. So today we're going to start by talking about pirates. And then we will end by talking about pirates. Because what better thing, first thing in the morning, than to wake up by talking about pirates. Okay, so I don't know if anyone here has ever been to like Nassau in the Bahamas. If you have, there's a couple of tourist traps that are very happy to take your money. And one of which is a pirate museum. And Nassau has something of a claim to this because they're a pretty big seaport and, you know, we're something of a hub for various historical reasons for piracy back in the day. And one of the exhibits that's in said pirate museum is pirates in pop culture. And so you have all of the glamorous depictions of pirates that you would expect. You have Captain Hook, you have Captain Blood, you have Captain Crunch, you have, I think they have like Long John Silver, all the stuff you would expect. They've got Pirates of the Caribbean. And a lot of times in pop culture, we have this very glamorous view of pirates. Why they sail the seven seas, you know, pillaging and plundering, and then when they come to port, they, you know, have a merry and, you know, rather morally questionable time on shore, and then they go back out on their merry way again. But obviously the reality is somewhat more sobering. You look at what it really would have been like, and the tagline you hear a lot, a short life but a merry one, they're not really living for anything. Yes, they have all of these pleasures that the world sort of would promise them would be fulfilling, you know? You get back to shore and you have all of this, you know, gold and treasure that you've plundered, and you get to, you know, spend it on whatever you want. But I think we can all recognize that that would be a very empty existence. If that's all you have, but that's what the world says would be enough. Not that common society is really condoning piracy, but you know. So if there's not a bigger picture, if there's not something more, then that should be enough. Having all the pleasures of the world at your disposal because you have whatever you want to pay for it. If there's nothing more, then that should be enough. But all of us realize what an empty existence that would be. And because we can look at that and we can say, is that all that there is? It gives us the inkling that, no, perhaps there's something more. So we have these deep desires. We have that yearning for something more. We have that need for something deeper than just the surface level existence that is offered to us by the world. And because we can sense this need, just like when you're hungry, if you're hungry, that points to a need for food. And if you eat, you're no longer hungry. Just as when you're thirsty, you know, you drink water and you're no longer thirsty. Those desires point towards a need. But it wouldn't make sense for you to have those if there was nothing that could satisfy that need. Now, this need for something more, it's more ambiguous than the need for food or the need for water. We, on a biological level, know that we need food and water. But it's just as real. But sometimes it can be a little harder to put our finger on, a little harder to define. Okay, so I want you to think back on your first major crush, whoever this was. For me, I see people grinning. For me, this was probably back in middle school. And there was something you recognized in that person, whatever it was. Maybe it was a combination of physical attraction and maybe it had a great personality. But whatever it was, you recognized something about that person, some beauty about that person that made you want to be closer to that person. Something about that beauty drew you in. Now think about the closest friendship that you've had. Now, for whatever reason you were friends with that person, there was something that you recognized in that person, whatever it was, maybe the way they acted, the way they spoke, the way they thought. And because of that, you wanted to be closer with that person. You wanted to spend time with that person. Think about the most beautiful piece of music that you've ever heard. Whatever it was that stuck out to you, you recognized some beauty in that. Maybe it was the symmetry of the music, the melodies, the harmonies. Maybe it was the voice of the person singing it. Maybe you really go for like a good beat, you know? But whatever it was, you walk away from that and you want to hear it again. You want to experience that again. But ultimately, even if you were in a perfect relationship with somebody, or I don't want to say perfect, even if you're in a relationship with someone who's really good, even if you are in a beautiful friendship with somebody, even if you are filling your mind with beautiful art and beautiful music, that isn't enough. You don't look at that and be like, wow, that's a beautiful painting. I am now perfectly satisfied. Nothing here is going to perfectly satisfy you. So, what is this more that we need? If there is food for when you're hungry, and if there's water or coffee for when you're thirsty, what is there to satisfy this more that all of the beautiful things in your life just make you yearn for? So there's a quote, and if you know me, well, you can probably guess who I'm going to, hang on, where it is. You can probably guess who I'm going to quote, but it is Jesus that, in fact, that you seek when you dream of happiness. He is waiting for you, and nothing else you find satisfies you. He is the beauty to which you are so attracted. It is He who provokes you with that thirst for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise. It is He who urges you to shed the masks of a false life. It is He who reads in your hearts your most genuine choices and the choices that others try to stifle. It is Jesus who stirs in you the desire to do something great with your lives, the will to follow an ideal, the refusal to allow yourselves to be grounded down by mediocrity, the courage to commit yourselves humbly and patiently to improving yourselves and society, making the world more human and more fraternal. So that is one of my favorite saints, John Paul II, in address to World Youth Day in 2000. So if that's what we have, we can look at that and we can compare that to all the counterfeits that the world offers us to satisfy that hole that we recognize in our hearts, that need that we recognize for more. Because everyone recognizes on some level, or if anyone who's introspective enough, recognizes on some level that need for more. And so the world is like, I got you, here we go. So that love that we have, that need for love that we have, the world gives us in the place of that lust, the willingness to use people as objects to try and fill that hole, that need for more. We can even use friends in this way as objects. If we just, are just, instead of uniting towards a common purpose, instead of willing their good, we just use them, to occupy ourselves. We just use them to try to sort of just fill the emptiness, even at the expense of whatever's best for them. Other pleasures that are offered to us, we can pursue. Some of them are good, but we can pursue them in excess, and some of them we should not be pursuing in the first place. But we're chasing that promise that it will fill the void. Maybe it's food, maybe it's money, maybe it's, maybe you enjoy, nice cars. There's nothing wrong with enjoying things, but that's never going to satisfy you. So this is obviously a Catholic retreat, so it shouldn't probably come as a surprise to anybody that I'm going to say that which is supposed to fill that hole, that desire, that need for more in your heart, is God in a relationship with him. All of the other beauties in the world, it's God created them all. And they all, in a way, reveal something about their creator. So, all of the beauties that we see, human love, friendships, I think it's about to die, there we go. A sunrise, or if you're like me and probably aren't outside at whatever, 6 o'clock in the morning, the sunset, seeing a newborn baby, all of those things, the yearning that they create in our hearts shows us in little ways what our hearts were made for. And God is too good and too extravagantly generous and loving to leave you without any kind of hope of satisfying that need that you have. That need that you have and the desire that he created you with in your heart. So, I'm going to get on the St. Augustine train here for a second. The famous quote that I'm sure you've all heard, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." God created you with that desire in mind. And all the beautiful things that speak to that, he wants to be the fulfillment of all of that for you. So, and it's when we acknowledge that God is the end that all of these other beauties are pointing towards. It's when we acknowledge that everything else, instead of being dissatisfying, it falls into place. All of a sudden, all of these other things that are beautiful but don't fill that void in our hearts, all of a sudden, if we see them in the light of being beauties that point towards God, then we're not expecting them to fill the void in our hearts anymore. We can appreciate them for what they truly are, and we can let them lead us towards God. And this is true for all different types of beauties that we see. So, so when I was in probably I think it was the end of my junior year of college, my best friend, who we started school together and we were like thick as thieves, she ended up graduating. She finished way early, and she ended up moving to Virginia, which is what I get for being friends with all of the political science majors, because they all want to move up and hang out in DC. And soon after that, and we talked on the phone all the time, and it was great, but soon after that, COVID hit. All of a sudden, everything shut down, and she's up in Virginia, living by herself, not a lot of friends nearby. Virginia was even more shut down than Georgia was, so we ended up spending a whole lot of time talking. So we'd FaceTime, video chat, and sometimes it'd be pretty much every day, because she was lonely and I was cooped up in the house, so we're gonna hang out. Now, it was funny because sometimes we didn't even talk. Sometimes we just have video chat on. I'd be there writing a paper, studying for a test. She'd be there reading a book, cleaning her house, whatever. But we were frequently on calls together, even just being with each other silently. And that friendship, and especially that period in that friendship, was when I took time to think about all of that, it changed how I saw spending time in prayer with God. Because before, I had been trying to go to adoration more frequently. I've been trying to, spend more time praying. But it can feel very, very, I don't want to say like formulaic, very stiff and stilted, You spend time praying, and maybe you're praying you're really good at praying all the scripted prayers. You pray your rosary, which is great. I'm not dissing your rosary by any means. You pray everything that, you have written out in front of you. But it's hard to make that transition sometimes to just praying with God and being with God. And I realized if I'm spending all this time with my friend, sometimes we don't even have to talk. Sometimes we just are together and that's enough. I was like, wow, well, all of a sudden that takes a lot of pressure off adoration, because you can just go, and even if you have nothing to say, you can just be with God. And out of that comes, beautiful conversations, but you don't have to go into every conversation with someone with a game plan, And it's the same thing with God. So that friendship with her and the beautiful times that we got to spend together during that time, it taught me a lot about friendship with God. And it taught me a lot about just being open and not having to, put the pressure on every time I decided to go to adoration. So for me, the beauty of this relationship was just a catalyst. It pushed me on towards a closer prayer life, a closer relationship with Jesus. Another thing that beauty does, though, is it pushes us on to be willing to do great things. And you see this a lot even in just normal, natural course of life. I don't know if any of you have had the privilege of being present at a birth. It is the most mind-blowing experience. It's so beautiful. But what's very interesting to see is a lot of times the mom has obviously had a much more tangible relationship with this child because she's been, toting this baby around in utero for 9 months. But it is such a cool thing to watch a father hold his child for the first time. And you talk to these dads afterward and they want to go out and they want to change the world. They're like, the world is not good enough for my child. I must make it better. And they see the beauty that is this new, bright, shiny little baby. And they're willing to move mountains. They're willing to die for this child. But that, you could say that's a very natural thing. You see even, I don't want to downplay the beauty of that at all, but you see, animals who are willing to defend their young. Okay, so you could make the argument that, well, that's just, hormones or whatever. But you see this with the saints. When they have this deep relationship with God, when they've encountered God in a beautiful way, the things that the saints are willing to do after they've encountered the beauty of God, it's mind-blowing. You look at all of the martyrs. You look at the martyrs who go to their death singing because they are willing to do that for the one they love. You see saints like St. Maximilian Kolbe, who's willing to offer his life in the place of another. He's willing to go through a death of starvation in Auschwitz because, obviously, for his love that he had for the person he was dying for. But where do you find the strength to do that? He knew who Jesus was. He loved him. He knew the beauty that was God. And because of that, he could go and die a horrible death. And not only die a horrible death, he could be in that, room, cell, he could be in there with all of the other people who were condemned to die with him. And not only is he willing to die, he is encouraging them and ministering to them until the end. Where do you find the strength to do that? If you recognize the beauty of God, if you know the beauty of God, if you know God, that beauty spurs you on to be willing to do great things. We see a lot of, you hear this story over and over again with a bunch of the early martyrs. But one in particular examples, St. Lucy. She was, I think I don't know, she's very young. I want to say maybe 12 or 13. But she had such a love of God that she consecrated herself entirely to him. And instead of being willing to be forced into a marriage with some guy, she was more willing to die. And martyrs didn't have pretty deaths back then, I'm not saying they do now, but it's not a fun way to go. She was willing to die a painful death because she had encountered the beauty of God, had given everything for it, and was willing to give her life to the very end for the beauty that she loved. So we, as we began with pirates, so we shall end with pirates. So this desire that you have to encounter beauty, you have to be obviously willing to encounter God, and you have to be ready to encounter him during prayer. And obviously there are different ways of praying, there are different methods that work. But you have to be willing to commit that time to your friendship with your Creator, with the Creator of the universe. So it's easy to do all of the scripted prayers. It's easy to just, say all the words. But it can be a little harder to bare your heart to God in prayer. So one help for this is you can pray like a pirate. Now, this is not one of the pirates that we talked about in the beginning of the talk. This one is a reformed pirate. But the acronym, the reason it's called praying like a pirate is the acronym is RARRR. And the different steps are acknowledge, relate, receive, and respond. And I'm going to take my book here because it's in one of the appendices. It is, for your further perusal, it is going to be Appendix C on page 14 in your handout. So you can take a look at that. But this is helpful. You can do this in the setting of, if you do Lectio Divina, which there's also in another appendix, there's also an outline of how to do Lectio Divina. You can do it also outside of the context of Lectio Divina, and it works. But the first thing you can do is acknowledge. Acknowledge where your heart is. Acknowledge what is on your heart. Acknowledge any feelings. Acknowledge how, if you've read a scripture passage, if you're doing this with Lectio, acknowledge how that has, how that speaks to you. And then, following that, the first R is to relate. This is a conversation. Tell God what you've just acknowledged to yourself. And one thing that I think helps is if you don't have to be, you can be very honest with God. You don't have to, it doesn't have to sound pretty. Just be honest with him. Tell him what's really going on in your heart. He already knows what he wants to hear from you. And then receive. Take some time to listen to what he is trying to give you in that moment. And this part, if you're anything like me, this part can be hard because your brain doesn't want to shut up. But it gets easier with practice. Just be silent, be quiet, and listen, and be open to what it is he wants to give you. And then you respond to that. So again, this is not a one-sided conversation. This is you speaking to God and receiving what it is he wants to give you. So talk to him about what you just received. And in this can be a very helpful jumping off point too into other conversations. You don't have to just follow the acronym every time, but it is a very helpful way to have that conversation with God. It's a very helpful way to be open to share your heart with the creator of the universe, with God who is beauty and gives us beauty. So I really encourage you, if you haven't tried that yet, I really encourage you to give it a go. Yeah. So once again, I'll just finish with John Paul II's quote, because I think it really sums up what it is that we are seeking when we have this desire for more, and when it pushes us to want to do something great with our lives. It is Jesus that, in fact, that you seek when you dream of happiness. He's waiting for you when nothing else you find satisfies you. He's the beauty to which you are so attracted. It is he who provokes you with that thirst for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise. It is he who urges you to shed the masks of a false life. It is he who reads in your hearts your most genuine choices, the choices that others try to stifle. It is Jesus who stirs in you the desire to do something great with your lives, the will to follow an ideal, the refusal to allow yourself to be grounded down by the mediocrity, the courage to commit yourselves humbly and patiently to improving yourselves and society, making the world more human and more fraternal. Thank you all.